Hey, welcome back to the Value Added Podcast. Jared here, and I am here with Jen Headley. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's a personal friend of mine, probably more so my wife. And my girls love her, my kids and everything. Go to church together. She is in ministry right here in our town where I serve as pastor. So Jen and I have connected over the last couple years and just grew a friendship, and hope that her story and her thoughts on some of these questions on life and lessons in leadership will bless you as you listen. So Jen, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from. You grew up somewhere different than I did.
I grew up in California and then moved to upstate New York to go to college at a small Christian college.
Okay.
Met my husband and never went back west. So
Do you miss it?
I miss aspects of California. I don't miss
Where in California?
maybe
Like
the politics.
northern?
Oh, I grew up by the beach.
Oh my gosh.
I grew up by the beach, and so I do miss
So
the
this-
ocean
yeah.
air and some of that. There's a friendliness, a welcoming that West Coast has that the Northeast doesn't always have, and part of that is just like
You got to peel back the layers of
you
people up
do
here.
have to, yeah, and you're inside a lot.
Yeah.
Outside, it's just a different kind of culture. But I don't miss the politics. I think it would be a harder place to live in. I will be completely honest about that. I do feel like we have some freedoms here, and I enjoy being able to send my kids to public school. And so there's pros and cons to
Both, yeah.
to the Northeast. And
So tell us about your growing up years, your childhood, adolescent. You grew up in
Sure.
California. Was this like a
yeah,
Christian godly home?
It was, yeah. I was homeschooled all of my life.
Right on.
And I think that my parents started it because some friends were wanting to try it out. So I went to kindergarten and then homeschooled the rest of the way through. And my parents always asked me if I wanted to go to public school, but I was afraid. I had fear. Fear was a pretty big driving factor in my life for a long time. So I stuck out homeschooling, but I never wanted to be, so this was in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
But I never wanted to be like the homeschool family, like
I know the feeling.
jumpers and and raising your own food. Though I would like that now. I like that aspect. That sounds really healthy and beautiful.
Having a garden and chickens and goats would be kind of nice, yeah.
Yeah, but at the time I wanted to be cool and I wanted to be trendy and I wanted to have friends and
Is it like an identity thing or just like
definitely an identity thing. I don't think that an identity issue was like a pretty strong struggle in my life, just because there was like safety and security, so I never had to push past it. So homeschooled. I have two brothers, so we did life. We had friends that we did homeschooling stuff, adventures with them. So it was like a good childhood. My parents are believers. We went to church. My mom helped with Sunday school. So I helped with Sunday school. I saw what ministry looked like. She would take food to people who needed, who had babies and stuff. So I watched my parents live some of these like Christian life
values.
Yeah. Okay. She always did her quiet time in the morning. And it was one of the things that I am most appreciative about my mom is that she set a very clear precedent. She didn't push it on me, but she made it clear that this was like an important value.
Made sure you
that
saw her
she
doing
needed.
it.
And she didn't mean for me to see it. I mean, I think there were a lot of days that she was like, "Go back to bed. Go.
Oh, I see.
I want some time with Jesus."
Okay.
But seeing that was how she started her day.
Okay.
So it's how I try to start my day.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
I think it's just a habit because I saw it.
So you grew up in a Christian home, godly influence.
Yep.
Why Northeast New York for college? What was that? How did that play out?
That was very much God. School isn't like my favorite thing, and we didn't have tons of money. So when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I didn't go to school because I didn't want to waste money not knowing what I wanted to do. But I wanted a challenge. I wanted to learn and grow. So a friend of mine and I got an apartment, not for any reason, not a negative to get out of the house, but like an opportunity to grow. The apartment was in the basement of our youth pastor's house. So we were close with them.
Sure.
Their wife was our Bible study leader. She mentored us. So it was a very safe environment, but I lived there for a couple years, had a couple roommates filter through. And the last one who had gotten engaged, I was like, I'm done. I don't want to look for another roommate. And God had been stirring in my heart that he had something for me. I just didn't know what it was. And I was like scared, but I knew I needed to go to school. I knew I wanted to follow him. I knew I wanted to do ministry. But at that time, like I was 22, I was like, what does that mean? Like, do I have to find a pastor and marry him? Like, or do I go to the mission field as a single woman? But like, in what capacity? So I had talked with my missions pastor and asked him like, wow, what am I supposed to do?
What do I do?
And he was like, well, if you can find like a 2-year Christian Bible education opportunity, a lot of missions organizations would take that. Like you wouldn't necessarily have to go to a 4-year college for some of those mission organizations.
Okay.
So I was kind of scoping that out. And in December 2004, a friend who had gone to Africa on a year-long missions trip had come home, and he was like, hey, we should go to Starbucks and like meet up. And so we did. And this was in like paper syllabus time. So he brought like all of his syllabus. He brought his like quiet time journal that Word of Life would have the students do.
Okay.
And he was like, you need to get out of town, Jen. It is time.
Wow.
And I was like, so I knew he was right, but upstate New York didn't sound appealing, like in any way, shape,
totally
or
different
form.
than
I would go to snow camp with them, like with the youth group, and I was like, okay, and now we're back to solid ground.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be out of the snow.
Oh my gosh.
2 days was great. But by the end of the conversation, I went back home. I had moved home because I knew there was a transition happening. So I moved home, and I walked in the door and I was like, Mom, Dad, I think I maybe should go to school in New York. And they both were like, okay. And I was like,
really?
What are you? Well, it starts in like 2 weeks. And they're like, okay. And I was like, oh my goodness. So like their response like stirred like a weird kind of fear within me, right? Like, why are they okay with this? Like, is this really what I'm supposed to do? Went to Christmas, like had some uncles in town, and they were all like, yeah, this is awesome. You should definitely do this. And we started looking around, and this is amazing. This is God just being so, so, so kind. One of my uncles had been in the military and had moved around, so he was never close to us.
Right.
But he had just moved like that week or the week before. Just moved an hour north of where Word of Life Bible Institute is.
Wow.
So we're like looking at paper maps like, oh, hey, yeah, this is all like, they're really close to you. So
you're moving thousands of miles, but you had a family member
family
within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's nuts.
It is nuts. And they were only there for the time that I was a student. And then they moved back to the West Coast.
Really?
So
how much did a role did they play when you were in?
Oh, I mean, on breaks and stuff, I would
go up and see them.
Yeah, they would pick me up at the airport.
Sense of family.
That's
super
which
cool.
was really sweet, really special. My grandma loved my cousins, 2 girls. They were homeschooled. They were the sweetest girls, and she was always like raving about them. And we always lived near grandma, my brothers and I was like, well, that's because we live close and you see all of us. You see us fight.
That's right.
But they truly were the best.
That's cool.
They really were. And it was really special to get to know them and hang out with them. It was a really sweet time.
That's really cool though. So it's kind of, you're kind of chalking that up to God's provision and
my goodness,
how he would wire things. And so
Absolutely.
is that where you met your husband, Jason? Is that Word of Life?
Yep. So Word of Life offers a 2-year program. So I did the first year of Bible studies, and I knew who he was. He worked with the the RAs, the guy RAs. So he was around, but we didn't have any conversations. I don't think we had any eye contact of any kind, like didn't have any communication. The second year that I was there, they do a winter camp program. So the students at the Bible Institute are the counselors for winter camp. And he was overseeing all of the counselors. And so he had interviewed me to be a unit leader to oversee like little groups of counselors. And that was the first time we had had a conversation.
Really?
Yep. And then that winter, like whenever a girl unit leader got sick, he would always call me to fill in. And I was like, sure, yeah, no problem. But I kept it just friends, and I kept pushing him off for till November. Till November, I said, okay, maybe we're not just friends. And we started dating like a month before I went back home.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. So you must have been a long distance for some time?
For a little bit, yeah. I moved back to New York in March of the following year. So, yeah. We got married later that year and then worked with Word of Life for 17 years.
Wow.
Or maybe 17 years was like my Bible Institute student time.
And then
working. Yeah. He always worked with them. I worked and then I had babies and I was home with babies. And then I went back and worked with them for a little bit.
Okay.
So.
Wow. That's really cool. So your faith journey so far, pinpoint for me if you can, one or two people who are like super influential so far in that journey right there up until your marriage and
up until my marriage.
Well, even go further than that because we just met a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So you're talking all your time with Word of Life wasn't until you came to Camp Monadnock is when you and I met. So bring us up to Camp Monadnock because and who are those influential leaders in your life so far?
Mm-hmm. So when I was younger, like high school, Adam and Brenda Weatherby, he was the youth pastor. It was the couple I rented an apartment from. I mean, she just let me kind of live with her, She let me see the good and the bad. She let me hear the struggle, and that was something I really valued. So I saw they have a fantastic marriage, but just like all of us,
they have a real marriage.
Yeah. And I got to see that. I got to see the joys of parenthood. I got to see the struggles of parenthood. And I got to hear some of the like pros and cons of ministry. I was working with a youth group, like volunteering at that time. So ministry is hard and there's a lot of judgment that comes with it. So I really appreciated their willingness to let me into some of those conversations. And afterwards, the Ellen Garland, her husband was the executive dean of Word of Life.
Word of Life, yeah.
When I got married, she was like, hey, why don't we start meeting together? And she also has let me see into some of the...
It's like a friendship / discipleship type of thing? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which, I don't know, I really value that because I think there's so much trust when you're friends and there's so much more honesty when it can just be a conversation. I've seen a lot, and I've participated in discipleship that's kind of like structured. But the discipleship relationships that I think have had the biggest impact on me on either side are the ones that are like deep connection because there's friendship involved. There's understanding. There's just life interaction happening as well. Yeah.
That's really cool. So you landed speed up a little bit, you landed at Camp Monadnock.
Yes.
Okay, here in southern New Hampshire.
Yep.
You and Jason. And so he's camp director.
Yeah.
And you're camp director's wife, but you also you're employed though, right? Like you have a role there.
Yes.
So tell us about your role now. What are you currently doing?
Sure. So I do the summer hiring and the volunteer coordinating.
Okay. So you're boss lady. That's what I would call you.
Yeah. I'm definitely married to the boss man. That is for sure.
Which makes you boss lady.
Yeah, it's been really sweet to get to know our volunteers and get to have the conversations with our staff. I get to do an interview process with everyone. So,
Including me. We
yeah,
did one
we
with me when I
did
volunteered.
an
Yeah.
interview
Yeah.
process, which
Yeah.
was fun. And there's like good questions that we get to ask.
There is,
And
yeah.
I just love getting to watch people like think through these things. Like some of them are harder questions. Some of them are personal questions. Some of
Yeah, I
them are
felt
like
personally
spiritual.
attacked. It's hurtful.
Well, I
Just
mean,
kidding.
maybe it was
was
the Holy
good.
Spirit.
No, it was good. It was good. Made me think for sure. So your role in hiring and being on staff and employed, because I know the history of the specific camp you work at, I have specific questions that I think would be super helpful for our audience. And one of those is when this was like an acquired ministry. So, Monadnock Bible Conference, they turned to Camp Monadnock, and then they ended up having to change hands, and Berea Ministries kind of acquired it, kept it as Camp Monadnock, but is also, I mean, you guys are pretty much rebuilding this camp in a way as far as like physical facilities and programs and things like that. You had to shut down for a bit to deal with maintenance issues. What has that journey been like from your perspective? Were you expecting
It's
that?
been a
or was
faith
it-
journey.
Okay.
That is for sure. We weren't looking to move. We were pretty settled. We were comfortably settled. We were happily settled. Roots were set down deep. Friendships were deep. Community was intimate, and we really loved what we were doing. We enjoyed the ministry that we had. We enjoyed the place that our kids were growing. Life was good. So we were not looking for something different. So when God made it very clear that this was something he had for us, there was a lot of trust involved. You're right that there was a lot that needed to get freshened at the camp. When we walked around with the executive director, my heart got heavy and heavier as we walked around, because I was like, oh my goodness, all this is potential. Like so much potential.
Right. Yeah.
But it just felt like only potential. So
why make the move in the first place? If you're settled and you're happy and life is good, relationships are deep, you're well connected, ministry's working.
yeah.
Did God have to move some mountains for Jen
yes.
Headley to move? Or like, what did that look like for you? Did you?
It looked like a phone call in the morning that my husband's job was shifting into a place that was not what he was interested in. And there was hurt involved in that. It felt like there was some rejection involved in that and lack of appreciation. But 2 hours later, somebody from Berea Ministries called.
Wow.
2 hours. Called and said, hey, like they were just camp talking. Like he worked with Berea Ministries. Jason was the director of the camps with Word of Life. And so they were just going to, hey, how are you guys handling the COVID regulations? This was in spring of 2021. So, everything was still unknown. And at the end of the conversation, he's like, hey, we're acquiring a new property. I know you guys are really settled, but, any chance you guys would be interested? And he was like,
Won't believe the conversation I just
well, maybe. And so I don't know. It's one of those, like, if you have walked with God, like he just made it very clear this was what we were supposed to do. So the process of faith and trust was the letting go process, not the believing he had this for us. Like both Jason and I were like, this is what we're supposed to do. I know that. But we didn't necessarily want to jump on it because it looked pretty. It looked hard. A camp that has closed is not an easy thing to get going again. So you're kind of like ground roots, like starting something over, which is a lot of work.
It's a double layer of trust there. So tell me this, as a mother, I mean, you had two boys, and you're taking them with you, uprooting them, and I'm sure they were pretty grounded, connected, friends. And what did that look like for you? How did you lead your family through that? With the
so
kids?
they were my biggest concern, right? Like I had moved a couple times. I knew, like, you've got to find a church. You start connecting with people. But they had never done that. And so they were by far my biggest prayer and concern. So, and if anyone was ever asking me, like, what do you guys need? I'm like, just pray for the boys, just pray for the boys. But also, this is one of the things that I see that God had planned that I couldn't have had planned. Once we moved onto an empty property, and they had only each other.
Wow.
And it was that
New
year that they
school.
became friends. Yeah. Like before they were brothers and they would hang out, but they had their friends. But that summer that we moved, they became friends.
They connected.
And that had been a prayer of mine since they were born, right? Like that was something that was, I wanted for them, and they were not wanting for themselves. They were little, I understand, but it's like my mom oversight. So I'm thankful that God, that he brought all of that into play in a way that I wouldn't have expected. I wouldn't have wanted, but they have settled into life here. They don't really talk about New York at all. They enjoy their friends. They enjoy their school. They enjoy church. They enjoy living on camp. Living at camp is kind of a dream for kids, really. Like
that's good though.
Yeah.
But your heart through all that is what people need to hear. It can be done when the Lord calls. There can be trust that's given, and there can be big moves when there needs to be. So that's super important. But so how do you? I mean, right now, Jen, because you're obviously a mom, you're a wife. You have this role, in this parachurch ministry, in this camp ministry. How do you balance life and then ministry and motherhood? I mean, what is Jen's go-to balance all of this?
I'm not good at that, but there have been a couple conversations recently about that I've had with other women talking about balance, and I'm like, well, balance it's a constant movement, right? Like balance, like I want balance to be steady, but balance itself is like
kind of fluctuates a bit.
You're choosing to balance and steady it. It's not solid ground. So balancing those things is a little difficult. I err on the side of preferring my family, though. I have seen what ministry life is like, and ministry life is hard because you're purposefully serving other people, and to follow God, to follow Jesus. He says to love these people, and you can go to some really extended lengths to love people because everybody has needs. But the boys are my first priority.
Yes,
they are my
be.
Constant ministry. They will be a part of my life until God takes me or takes them. So I err on the side of motherhood over camp life, and I am vocal about that. People at camp know that. I don't want to, I'll say things like, I don't want to sacrifice them to ministry. Like, I want them to know I love them. I want them to know I'm available for them. I want them to know they can come to me. And that I enjoy the ministry aspect, but that they are the priority. And I can see when I am preferring camp over them, like their attitudes change, their interactions change. Like if you're in tune to like the people in your home, you can see those things, right? Like, and so when Lucas starts to pull away and disengage, I'm like, oh, I need to re-engage a little bit more. And it is hard. Like I said, I don't do this well because the reality is there are people on property that God has called us to serve and to love and to minister to, and that's a time commitment. That's an emotional commitment. So navigating where on property, who on property needs that, that can actually be kind of tricky. We live in community, and until we had moved onto Camp Monadnock property. Community had always just been like this external sort of thing. Like you have church community, you have these like your neighborhood community, but like we live and we breathe and we serve and we eat and we play together with the same people. So
I may have told you this, but as your pastor, I think you're doing it the right way. I mean, when I was hired here, I think I may have told you this, but so forgive me if I did. But when I was hired here at the church, I actually told them, the elders, when they were asking me, some of these questions about family and life and ministry, I said, I will protect my family from this church if I have to, from you as an elder board if I have to. So I will not sacrifice my wife or my kids for this church. And they so appreciated that. Obviously, they hired me, right? And so I think that's, I think it has to be God, then family, and then the ministry.
Yeah.
Your family is your first ministry. I think one of my favorite memories so far of you guys being at camp, I was volunteering with my brother John for a big event you had. We were bringing the tractors, in the hay wagon, or whatever you guys call it, to One Tree Hill. So across the road to parking lot. And as we were doing this, I'm on the back of the tractor, kind of running the step stool for the people to get in and out. John's driving. And here comes Jason, your husband, and the boys. I forget which one was which, but one of them was in the front with him, and one of them's just curled up in a blanket, riding in the back seat, just kind of looking at me because he's facing the opposite direction. And it's neat. I've seen other families do that. But a lot of times, like when I grew up there, and this is not, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but there was, when I grew up working in camp ministry, some of them did that, but a lot of them, it was like I wouldn't really see the kids as much. And I don't remember seeing them as much as like today. And so that's a big deal, just that they're actually seen, they're there, they're part of it. I've got 2 staffers right now who are going to have babies this year. One I think is really close, and the other one is, and the other one is like a month away. And I've told them, if and when God calls you back, your children are always welcome to be in the building.
Sure.
Right? Because we want to teach that to the students. And there'll be times where obviously they can't be in the room when we're talking about certain things of that nature. But I think you're doing it the right way.
Oh, thank you.
No, absolutely. So camp ministry, specific challenges you've faced there, just as, same thing. I mean, obviously balance was one of them because we know that balance fluctuates a bit. And what has been another really big challenge for you?
Learning how to live in community truly was like the biggest challenge for me. It looks like kids were over at the house a lot, and that had never been something we had experienced. We didn't live in a neighborhood with children, so
just coming right in like they own the place. Like,
they didn't like feel that way, but they were like at the door pretty regularly, and just learning like what do my kids need? What do we need? Like I had this immediate thought like, oh, well, all the kids are here. Like I have to love their moms by allowing them to be here. But those first couple months, like that was it was too much for me, and it was too much for my boys because we like people, but we are introverts as well. And so like I had to have conversations about when the kids could come over or not. But like I felt like awkward, and like I felt like I wasn't loving people well, and I felt like I was failing.
Healthy boundary creating was it?
Yes. But I didn't know how to create healthy boundaries. Like I never had to, right? Like before I'd chose like, oh, here's a person in town that needs to be loved, and I will go love them, right? Like I chose when to love.
Yeah.
But being on property, that like the choice was out the window.
Yeah.
Like it was just everywhere you looked is an opportunity to love. And so it showed me how selfish I was. It showed me how I still like I followed Jesus by my own standards and not by his standards, which was then really humbling.
Yeah.
So, and this is where balance comes into play again, right? Like, okay, we did need to create some boundaries because I just couldn't have kids at the house every day. But also, I needed to not be selfish and be compassionate and remember what it was like to have little kids. And some of the moms are homeschool moms. So I remember what it was like living in a homeschool house. And like in the afternoon, you're like, I watched my mom be like, okay, and now go Go, go, go.
Yeah.
I've been with you all day. So, like,
But Jesus did this kind of stuff. I mean, like
he did.
at one point it was like, no, I'm not going to come to Lazarus right away because I've got things going on right now that are important. And then the next minute of course, the crowd, when he fed the 5,000, were trying to make him, he figured this is a good point. They're probably going to try to make me their king and
Right.
get them out of Roman, occupation or whatever. But he dismisses his disciples, puts them in a boat and sends them across, and then dismisses the crowd and goes away to pray.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we're done. Time is done with you today.
Yeah.
So I think you do see him doing that, escaping to pray and
Right.
dismissing crowds and, just being with his small family, so I think it's important, but I just wish it told you like, here's X, Y, and Z of how to, this is when it's okay. This is when it's not okay. That would be nice. But I think he trusts us with that to know.
Well, that's where living by the Spirit,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
following the Holy Spirit and,
Exactly.
which I didn't always do, like I followed my own heart. I followed my own emotions on some of those responses. And so the challenge to live on property and love the people we work with, I love them. I value them. They're tremendous. God brought us an eclectic group of people who have different life experiences. So that I really believe like then we can minister to anyone who comes on our property because
You're well-rounded.
Everyone has like a different story that they have experienced God in. So I value that, but differences are different. And so
Sometimes the
learning
people
to be
that
humble.
God puts you to work with are not the people you would have chose to hang out with to
Right.
begin with,
Right.
but you learn to love them. Yeah, no, that's so true. So talk about yourself for a minute. Like, what are some of your practices to sustain all of this? I mean, what role does
Yeah.
prayer, Bible reading,
Sure.
like, what do you do? Do you have moments of rest? Do you get away from, family and camp just for solitude for you, or do you have friends, or like, what do you do to sustain yourself?
Like I said, my mom demonstrated personal quiet time, and then going to Word of Life Bible Institute, that was a requirement, but it was already a practice of mine. Personally, I prefer quiet time in the morning. I prefer to get up before the house is up and to have some quiet, have some coffee and talk and pray and read. And I enjoy that space. Honestly, for my time right now, it's a very shortened time, and it's not my preference. But we have kids who have to get out of the house early, and we do quiet time together as a family, like family devotions in the morning before they go to school. So then that means I have to like intentionally come back to that, and that is something I'll be completely honest. I'm constantly like trying to figure out: do I have a system, or is every day just kind of like all right, God, like how do I continue walking with you now? So if I go out for a walk, I pray. There we have a couple paths around property, and inevitably there's on the main road up to Mount Monadnock. I always end up crying on the way down. Like I have a conversation with God, and then He like corrects me on the way down, and I'm like, always I'll have my sunglasses on because people are going by, and I'm like, okay, God, all right. So getting outside, because I can put away like all the chores and all the like the socks that are on the floor and the dishes. I try to listen to worship music because my thoughts will run their own way. And so trying to keep truth at the forefront of my mind. But even that, like I find that the longer I've created that to be a habit, the more I have to make it a choice.
And so let me ask you this: aside from prayer, Bible readings, that's like obviously the most important thing, but we're not called to do this in and of ourselves. Like we're not called to do these kinds of tasks alone, let alone just live alone. Be isolated. Leadership is a team sport. We like to say here on this podcast, and along with other terms that mean the same thing. But so, who is it for you? I mean, who do you partner with? I mean, like, who do you glean from? Who's influential right now? You mentioned some in the past. Like, who is it that you go to? Is it some of the people you work with? Is it other people?
Yeah.
People that speak into your life and.
So I had two people. My husband, because he is our family leader, but he is also my boss. So he is
plays
my
all the roles.
leader
Yeah.
in so many aspects. But he has so much wisdom, and I handle things so much emotionally usually, and he's more grounded.
He's a pretty even keel guy.
Yeah. So he's a good sounding board for my emotions. And then my best friend, Liz, she's
wonderful.
so wise, and she's okay with me like asking the hard questions. The Bible is hard. Following Jesus is hard, and I think some believers are afraid to ask the hard questions and ask, like, why is he asking me to do this? Why is this the thing that I'm going through? Why are we like struggling here? Why is this like not easy? What does this mean? And she is never bothered by those questions and never thinks that I'm like
overreacting or doubting.
Because I think we need to have that back and forth. So she's my person that I can ask all those questions and know that I'm safe, and she's like constantly digging in the word, and she loves to like dig into the word. So I know I will hear truth back from her. So I would say right now, those are my two.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's good though.
Sounding boards.
So glad to know you have that. That's because not a lot of leaders value that enough.
Sure.
They're kind of lone rangers, so to speak. But just a couple more questions for you, if you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So another one that I was wondering for you specifically is in your leadership role at the camp. What are the biblical principles that guide your leadership role there? If you can identify a couple. I mean, you got to do the hiring, got to do the interviewing. I see you all over camp when I go up there, just making connections and talking to people. Do you have like a set of values that kind of help you personally, or is it more standards that camp puts out? I mean, how do you?
I mean, I think that there is, I think encouraging people is like the thing that I try to like go to as steadily as I can. And the reason is I don't think I have all the wisdom. So I do think God has given me insight to be able to see needs and to see where people are struggling or doing well. And I don't know that that's a biblical principle, but that is what I try
encouragement
to.
is for sure.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual gift. But I want to be a leader that encourages. I had mentioned my friend Ellen, who had mentored me, and I got to watch her mentor a lot of girls, and then she mentored me for a time, and she had a shift in her life and encouragement. While she was always very encouraging, she like leaned into that, and that spoke life to me. Like I needed correction and I needed direction at times as well, but like encouragement like spurred me on in a way that correction wouldn't have done. And that's probably personality based. Like I am a words of affirmation person. So I realize that if I'm encouraging some people, it's probably life-giving for some and it's probably just nice for others. But I want to see them and I want to value them. And so like speaking that out is something I try to do.
That's wonderful, Jen, because I think encouragement, it really should be the filter through which we lead people. I mean, even if you have to tell someone this isn't the position for you here at the camp, we need to do that in an encouraging way. But here's what I do see in you. Here's where you could potentially look to serve, or we have this other opportunity over here, help to redirect people. I think it's when you bring good news, bad news, discipleship, correction, all of that should be through. I think that lens of encouragement. So I think that's a lot more important than you might be giving credence to it. So
I mean, that's how God has communicated with me.
Yeah.
In correction, like He has always been so kind and tender, even when I am needing correction. So
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure. So one last question.
sure.
If you're looking at, let's say we'll pick on young people for a minute,
Okay.
and we'll say Jen's gonna pass on one or two things to the next person, like say taking your position at camp, or just advice for new leaders, a new mother, a new, person coming into camp ministry, church ministry, going to disciple someone. What's one piece of advice you would leave for that group of people?
Man, I think prayer. I think prayer is for a new mom, like you don't always have the time for all the things, but setting time aside to pray and ask God for the wisdom and ask God for the grace and ask God for the compassion. For a young person, I got to speak to so many students at Word of Life, and I'm like, well, what is God saying to you? And like, don't listen to me. Don't listen to another person. Like, what is God saying? Like, your parents have wisdom. Your friends have, sometimes they have wisdom.
Depending on if you're friends.
Depending on your friends. But learning how to pray, how to ask the requests, how to speak the truth, how to say when you're frustrated, but learning how to sit and listen is, I think, a difficult. I don't know. I don't think everyone is willing to do that because you have to sit in the quiet. You have to sit in the unknown. You have
awkward.
to sit in the awkward. But Jesus gives us like the best leadership example when he uses the shepherd and the sheep. He says, my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. They don't listen to the voice of a stranger, but they know me. They know they can trust me. They know I'm going to lead them to good pasture. They know I'm going to protect them, but they have to know him and hear his voice. The sheep are not good sheep if they just choose a person and just like baa at them. Like
Right.
the sheep are the followers. So learning how to have, maybe learning how to respect God and fear God should probably be before you pray to him.
I know when I teach the on the Lord's Prayer, I think it's almost like it's outlined for you. Like when you come to God, it's like, our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Right? Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Then we bring requests after there's like this moment of honoring. And so I've often said the same thing when you come before God, as a person, as a human being, there is a level of respect that should be there, honoring who he is. But then also in the same breath, you're bringing requests because the veil's been torn and we have direct access to God. But no, I think your advice is so needed. I think a lot of people need to hear, just the idea of prayer itself. Prayer is often the least attended activity at a church.
Sure.
Just that.
Yes.
So you often wonder, well, what about people's personal life? Is it the same? It's really good. Just that whole idea of communing with God through prayer and through study and through that listening and that respect and that sitting in that space. But that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing this and being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really praying your story blesses people like it has mine. Always enjoy doing this to hear. Even like you, like I thought I knew you pretty well, and then hearing some of this is like, oh, I didn't know that. So I'm hoping people are blessed by that. And so thanks for being here. I appreciate what you do. And
Absolutely.
appreciate being able to minister to your kids. That's been kind of fun.
They love youth group.
That's wonderful.
They actually love it. They don't want to miss it. So
Cool.
thank you for doing that, for serving
Absolutely.
them and helping them grow.
It's been a pleasure. So, well, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us, for being here. We're praying for you. Give us a like, a share, a comment. If you want to connect, if you have questions for Jen, we will forward her so many questions. So we'll see you next time. Take care.